If you look at any list that ranks the best Ratchet & Clank games, you will see Going Commando near the top, and I can see why. When I went back to 100% this original trilogy back in 2013, Going Commando was the only one I didn't end up completing though. I went back and changed that earlier this year, and after I beat it, I couldn't figure out why I didn't 100% it back in 2013. This is definitely the most important game of the original trilogy because it introduced changes that defines what a Ratchet & Clank game is. Upgradable weapons, the ability to strafe, and a greater focus on action over platforming. But with each change for the better, there are some headaches that frustrated me along the adventure. With the list of improvements a mile long, how did these headaches turn into an obstacle that was stopping me from calling this one my favorite? Now before I get started, this video was not made to try to get you to change your opinion of the game. This is my first time replaying it in over 7 years, and I viewed it with a more critical eye this time around. Nothing I say here should make you feel bad about liking this game. I just wanted to show you the perspective I experienced while playing it this time. I want you to still love this game after this video is done, but if you can look at it with a more critical eye next time, then I can call this video successful in my eyes. So a quick story recap before we get into it. Ratchet and Clank are bored, they get stolen by this guy.
I'm Abercrombie Fizzwidget.
He needs them to steal back this experiment from the masked villain, and we're on our way to another galaxy. You start the game without Clank, and they never really explain why he isn't with you. The only cutscene we get is of Clank getting kidnapped in your apartment, but still, no explanation on why he wasn't with Ratchet in the first place. Maybe he was getting his bolt looped from the robot masseuse they were given for helping out Megacorp. I don't know, but it doesn't make sense why the two were separated. What I'm trying to say is, the intro is a slog to get through. Both Ratchet 1 and Going Commando start off with very similar intros. You get the long jump and the high jump in the third world, the first couple levels are there to show you the ropes and get you familiar with the gameplay loop, and you start to acquire many of the gadgets that you will be using throughout your entire journey. The major differences are in the design choices, and that's where I've always noticed a personal grievance I have with Going Commando's first world. You go from a bright ship in the sky to a dark, rainy swamp that has green liquid stopping your forward progress at every turn. To get across it, you have to jump on these dinosaurs that absolutely lose their shit when you barely even touch them. So all you're doing is jumping from each platform to the next, but you have to wait for it to swim over to the next one before you can even progress. Now, let's compare it to the first world of the first game. In Ratchet 1, these platforms are also designed to test your patience, but you are given a controlled environment to test that out in. If you mess up on one of the platforms, you get another chance to try it out without making it feel like you've failed. If you try to rush forward or miss a jump in the swamp, you'll be swallowed alive and will have to retry the entire obstacle course. It just feels like this shouldn't have been the first world when you're playing a game as bright and beautiful as Ratchet and Clank.
Hey, see if you can find anything worth watching.
In the first world, you get two brand new gadgets that were not in the first game. These are the Dynamo and the Tractor Beam. The only gadgets that were brought over from the first game were the Swing Shot and the Grind Boots. Almost every gadget is new, and most of them are used for solving both timed puzzles and environmental ones. In Ratchet 1, you use the Trespasser almost exclusively, but for this game, we have the Electrolyzer and the Infiltrator. With the Trespasser, you had all the time you needed to complete the puzzle, which only consisted of moving 3 rings and matching the lasers to the spot. You could always figure it out with enough time, and sometimes you could just move around random bros and it would solve itself. The Electrolyzer just has you switching around panels to match up where the spark is going next, and the Infiltrator is a guided light puzzle based around a sphere. The biggest difference with the puzzles in the sequel is that they all have time limits to them. If you can't get the puzzle done fast enough or mess up an attempt, you have to start again. This is where I think the changes to the puzzles actually was a good thing for the sequel. Kind of. With the puzzles becoming time challenges now, they're a lot harder to solve, and the Infiltrator did a lot better job than the Electrolyzer. When you mess up one of these puzzles, you get kicked out and have to go back in and try again. Whereas with the Infiltrator, it keeps you in the puzzle and takes you back to the start. It actually shows you the progress you made when returning to the start, allowing you to memorize that path forward and giving you a better chance at solving it with your next attempt. I rather enjoyed most of these puzzles, and the new gadgets added some variety to the environmental puzzles, but thank God they kept the Swing Shot. I think we can all agree that every game is better with a grappling hook. The best new gadget they introduced was the Therminator, which freezes or thaws water. It doesn't sound that exciting, but the instances where you have to use it are incredibly creative. When you stand on this platform, you have to figure out how to get up there. So freeze it in place, and now you can get up there. In the same section, you even scale up a waterfall once you freeze it in place. These new gadgets were amazing additions to the gameplay, but with so many of them, I felt like I was having to constantly swap out weapons to use them. Every time I replaced a gadget in the quick select menu to try out the new weapon I just bought, it was almost inevitable that I was about to hit a puzzle that needed that exact gadget. Oh cool, a new area to explore. Time to bust out that tractor beam again. I didn't notice this constant switching going on in the first game, but it still felt like it happened more often than I would like it to. But hey, it's not as bad as Ocarina of Time. You do so much switching in that game that I finally did something good for myself by switching to a better game. Now, with Ratchet and Clank, it's not exactly known for having the best stories, and this one is no exception. I'm going to be talking about spoilers briefly, so here's a timestamp for when spoilers are done, but I'm going to blow through this part because I don't want to spend too much time on it.
Ready? Go!
The protopath that the robber stole gets rescued by Ratchet and returned to Fizzwidget. We find out that the robber is actually a Lombax, which is the same creature as Ratchet, and used to work for Megacorp. The protopath is dangerous, Ratchet and Clank are both oblivious, and the ending is very mysterious. Fizzwidget was Captain Quark all along, and he plans to be the savior of this universe, since he's a disgrace in his home one. Like a buffoon, he makes the situation worse, Ratchet saves the day, and they all lived happily ever after. After watching all the cutscenes again, the story they told in under an hour actually was pretty good for the time constraints they had. My main issue with it though isn't about the story, but with almost all the characters. We are shown that Angela, the thief, can't stand incompetent people and will call them idiots if they mess up. But after Ratchet knows who she is, she learns patience all of a sudden. It's just these little gripes start compounding when you see them constantly, but the biggest change is to Ratchet. Ted Price, the game's producer, wanted Ratchet to sound less cocky and be nicer to Clank, and I can totally see that. He was a dick in the first game, but in the process of changing his personality, I feel like they went too far with it. For example, the black market dealer comes in and shows us again how the tongue-in-cheek humor is still there, but Ratchet isn't that edgy teenager anymore. He's now just that kid that doesn't know what to say in an awkward situation.
Put it in the slot. The weapon you want modified, put it in the slot.
Oh, I get it. You make weapon modifications.
He just feels a little stiff compared to the first game. He may have been a douche in Ratchet 1, but at the end when he goes back to repair Clank, we get to see the character progression in his personality. He went from viewing Clank as an obstacle in his way to becoming friends with him, and that's just missing from this game. It's not a bad story by any means. I was just personally disappointed in that tonal shift. God, I'm making it sound like this game didn't get anything right, but I'd be stupid if I said that. This game made improvements to the gameplay that have stayed consistent with the series and resulted in an overall better gaming experience. Weapon upgrades, health upgrades, strafing, armor, weapon mods, more variety in the Clank gameplay sections. The list is endless. Let's take the Lancer for example. When you see the Lancer go from this to this, you want to see what the other weapons are going to turn into. It's such a great mechanic because it promotes diversity on the battlefield and it rewards you for just playing the game. Positive feedback goes a long way with keeping the player engaged with your game. Same thing with the health upgrades. The more enemies you kill, the quicker you obtain more health. You even get wrench upgrades in this game, and you find them in the strangest of places. One's underneath a desert encased in glass, and the other just floating in front of you while you're escaping from a prison. This scene has no explanation, and it feels pretty random, but I can actually relate to it. God, I can't wait to see what's inside. Oh my god, a new wrench! These RPG mechanics, introduced in Going Commando, have stayed ever since, and have been fine-tuned with the later entries. Like strafing. With its addition, most of the new weapons were made to take full advantage of this functionality. A major chunk of the enemies are long-ranged or shoot from afar, so the introduction of strafing makes sense. There are some weapons that still work better without strafing, but there was one weapon that was designed to work like they did in the first game, and that was the lava gun. The Pyrocitor was one of my favorite guns from the first game, and the lava gun would have been my favorite in this one, if it wasn't for one flaw. Once you upgrade the lava gun into the meteor gun, the functionality is completely changed. Instead of a stream of lava, it now shoots tiny meteors that don't shoot very far and aren't very accurate. It functions like any other gun now, and it was extremely disappointing, but Insomniac did fix it in the third game by making it the liquid nitrogen gun. It's really cool when a developer actually listens to player feedback, and you can see that they have a passion for creating the best game humanly possible. That's why I love Insomniac games so much. Speaking of the weapons in the first game, even though you're in a different galaxy, Insomniac still included some of the fan favorite weapons from the first game. And if your memory card had saved data for Ratchet and Clank 1 on it, you got those weapons for free. So wait, that means I get to use my favorite weapon, the Tesla Claw, all over again. Hell yeah. It was so nice to use some of these great weapons from the first game, and it was a real treat to finish out the planet with these familiar weapons. But after a couple of planets, you start to figure out just how underpowered these weapons are. They can't be upgraded through combat like the new ones, so they end up being almost useless once you get towards the late game. And it's not just these old ones that are useless, but a lot of the new ones as well. This finally brings us to the point of the video you've all been waiting for, and that is the one major flaw. The biggest flaw in Ratchet and Clank Going Commando that just can't be ignored is the late game difficulty spike. There are a couple specific factors that go into this, and those are weapon effectiveness, the cost of everything, and the imbalances of the currency earned. Your weapons can only upgrade once for your first playthrough, but the weapons you start off with are extremely underpowered in the late game. With Ratchet 1, the Pyrocitor is the first gun you can buy, and it is still effective against the enemies in the late game. With Going Commando, even when these starting weapons are fully upgraded, it takes 75 shots from the Lancer and 4 atomic bombs to take these enemies out in the final level. These specific enemies are scattered everywhere, so you don't really have time to empty half your ammo into them when more are constantly respawning around you. Really, the only weapon that lets you stand a chance in the late game is the Bouncer. With a good shot, you can take these guys out with only one ball, and it still damages the other enemies around them since the mini balls scatter everywhere after exploding. It has immense power when fired directly at a target, and then the AoE blast takes care of everything that's left. This is really the last weapon you need to effectively make it to the end, and the price tag for it reflects that. This gun costs 100,000 bolts. And that took some time to get that amount, because it seems like at every turn, the game is asking for more money from you. The way I played both games is by smashing every crate I see, because I know every bolt counts, and I never hit a currency wall playing that way in the first game. I did with the second one though. Right after getting the Bouncer, I ran into this dinosaur that needed 40,000 bolts to give me coordinates to another level. I only had 20,000, so I went to the next world I could go to, and that was this planet, the Tundor Wastes. In this vast frozen area, you have a giant opening to run around in order to collect moonstones to get this guy to move this rock. So I started collecting, and I'm also paying attention to the bolts I'm getting from these Yetis, who are extremely aggressive and hit pretty hard. You barely get over 100 bolts for defeating these guys, and I need 20,000 to move on. I get enough moonstones, the guy moves the rock, and then I get to an area where I really noticed a big issue with the currency. These tiny robots give you like 70 bolts tops for defeating them. They're pretty easy, so it's reasonable. But then I smashed these 2 crates and over 2,000 bolts came out. So instead of defeating enemies for currency, break the crates instead. Gotcha. It's not bad game design because it promotes exploration and makes the crates way more valuable to you. I do think the Yeti should be dropping more bolts since they are tougher to kill and they cling to you like shit to a blanket, but it's just a minor balancing problem. I finally get enough bolts, go back and buy the coordinates, and now I'm off to continue the story. I arrive at this new planet and just start breaking crates like normal. Okay, this one had a little less than the crates on the last world. Not a big deal. Wait. Why did those crates barely have any bolts in them? Like, why? Wait, what? Why is it the same thing with those? Okay, now this shit really doesn't make sense. But wait, what? Why do those have so much more in them? This is the biggest flaw in the game to me. Everything costs way too much money, and you don't have enough of it. With the random amounts of bolts you get from crates and the enemies barely giving you any, you are almost always short on money. Also, with the cost that it takes to kill certain enemies, you are only making a slight profit when you subtract the cost of the ammo you use to kill them with. Like, you barely get over 100 bullets for killing a Yeti, but if you have to use 2 bouncer shots at 50 bullets a shot, you're barely ahead. And a quote about the first game, Ted Price says, "By recording and charting data from the game, we were able to tune item prices, adjust challenge difficulty, and change monetary rewards. Without this exhaustive process, the game probably would have been unplayable." If that's the process they went through for the first game, then I know they did that with the second one. The simple fix should have been to increase the amount of bullets you get from certain enemies, so it could help you afford things like the armor you need to stand a chance against the absolute worst level in this game. Snivelak. It sounds like a disease that would be very painful if you caught it, but it couldn't be worse than playing this level. The Thug's headquarters is located on this planet, and it is literally the bane of my existence. The level makes sense in the context on why there would be so many enemies you would have to fight, but god damn if it isn't frustrating to do so. It's wave after wave of enemy defenses, and they're all bullet sponges if your better guns aren't upgraded yet. This is the first level where you start to notice just how underpowered the early weapons are because they're almost useless here. Let's take the Visibomb for example. It's the most powerful gun in the first game, besides the Rhino, but it's all but a pea shooter now. In Ratchet 1, it takes down a powerful tank in one shot. In Going Commando, the same weapon against the same type of enemy takes 9 shots to take it down. I had to speed up this footage because it took so long to blow it up. This is the hardest gauntlet you will face in this game, with ships coming down that you can't blow up beforehand, moving lasers that you have to jump through, and electric walls filled with enemies to prevent you from running past everything. It took me 6 tries to get through to the boss fight, and I only succeeded because my health upgraded seconds before I was about to die. It was pure luck that I was able to get to the boss of this horrid level, but I still had to dodge and weave my way through enemy fire. So that means the boss should be a true test of all the skills I've learned so far, right?
Prepare to die!
This is the worst boss fight I have ever beaten. And yes, I did beat the Dragon God in Demon Souls. It's just so damn tedious, having to run around for over 13 minutes, just constantly shooting this giant robot over and over again. You have to shoot the little robots he sends out, and also get out of the way when he comes to break your turret. If you get lazy, like I did, and just wanted to be done with the fight, well, you're gonna have a bad time. With the inclusion of all these new gameplay mechanics, it was really unfortunate that I found most of them to be more tedious than fun, and those include the ship battles. Oh god, I can't even look at them. It just reminded me too much of the gummy ship segments in Kingdom Hearts. Ugh. I'm getting flashbacks again. This game wasn't the one to introduce ship combat, but it did make it overstay its welcome. In the first game, there are only 2 segments where you have to use the ship for combat, and they're both different. One's to shoot the ships dropping waste into the lakes of planet Pokataru, and the other to defeat Captain Quark in a space battle. Both are completely different scenarios that require you to use the ship in a unique way. They are also coming at the end of 2 levels, so you get to see an overview of the planet you just explored while flying around the ship. With Going Commando, they feel like interruptions in the gameplay loop. At certain points in the story, you will be on your way to another planet, and you have to do these ship combat sections to clear out the enemies trying to stop you. It's not hard, it's just uninteresting and repetitive gameplay. With the ships, you can fly around and try to look for them, or you can just fly straight and they position themselves right in front of you for you to blow them up. But it's not only small ship battles that you will have to deal with. You also get to shoot down some giant ships like in the first game, and also defense turrets. The ships are pretty straightforward, but the defense turrets have little repair bots that come out and fix them if you destroy one. It tells you that after you blow one up. So if you've just been focusing on one, you can get caught up in a loop where you might have just one left, and then another one gets repaired right before you destroy them all. I remembered this because it wasn't my first time playing through it, so it was actually pretty easy for me to beat this time around, but I do honestly remember that I had a lot of trouble with this when I played it as a kid. This game is by no means bad, but it's probably one that I'll never go back to now. Going Commando released 1 year and a week exactly after the first game, and with all the new additions added, I can't figure out how they pulled it off. The amount of stuff added into this game is astonishing, and it was still only made by a team of 80 people. That's double the size of the first game, but that didn't stop them from going above and beyond with expanding the Ratchet & Clank formula. There are 2 last things I want to talk about briefly, and those are the spherical worlds and the Insomniac Museum. These worlds I'm talking about are these tiny ones where you get to roam around as Giant Clank or Ratchet and destroy everything in sight. It's one of the multiple sections that break up the traditional gameplay loop, but it doesn't disrupt the pacing. They are spaced out perfectly, and you never get sick of them, whether you're playing as Ratchet or Clank. These tiny planets weren't easy to make either, and to get the gravity just right, it took changing 50,000 lines of code to get everything working properly. The other amazing location that was added was the Insomniac Museum. There are different ways of accessing the museum, but the footage on screen right now is how I got into it. I honestly think this is the coolest secret put into any game. You get to access a museum that has all sorts of developer information about how the game functions, and you even get commentary directly from the developers. It's laid out exactly like the Insomniac game's office when they were making it, and you just get to run around and explore the place. It gives you a personal look at some cut content and a bunch of other things that didn't end up making it into the final game. This game is a labor of love, and I really wish I could have ended up loving it like so many other people. There's just too many minor annoyances to me, but I don't speak for everyone. Just because I found something annoying doesn't mean you're going to, and that's what I love about making videos like this. I try to show my perspective in a creative and informative way in hopes you might look at a piece of media I'm talking about from a different viewpoint. Like I said in the intro, I am not here to change your opinion, and I truly want to hear about why you love this game, so please let me know down in the comments. I would love to start a discussion about Going Commando, and I just want to say, thank you for making it to the end of this video. I'm making videos like this for every game in the Ratchet & Clank series, so if you don't want to miss them, why not subscribe? It doesn't cost you anything. Thank you guys so much for watching, and hopefully 2021 is a lot better than 2020.